hi everyone. So I'm
no
Naz. I'm Naz, and I'm facilitating today's forum. So I'm one of the parent reps at Family Voice, but I'm a registered mental health nurse and a parent carer of an adult child, profoundly autistic, epilepsy and learning disabilities. Wonderful lady though, she is. So yeah, so we'll go and do our introductions, and then I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, I guess it is. I'm more familiar with Teams than I am with Zooms, but I understand there is a way of putting your hands up on Zoom. If people can put themselves on mute, if there's any background noise, that would be really helpful. There is chat here, and in the chat I have put the link for feedback, because I've been told off in the past for not getting feedback from people. It's really important, because otherwise we can't evidence the effectiveness of these forums. So the links are there. I'll go around and I'll start with Rachel, because you're on top of the screen, and we'll go around in a circle. You're on mute, Rachel. Oh, hang on.
Right. I'm Rachel, and I am mum to a 22-year-old young woman with moderate to severe learning disabilities, but who lives in supported living. So she lives in Peterborough. She's 10 minutes walk from me at the moment, in a supported living house. And she's been there since the middle of June 2020.
Sunny?
You're also on mute.
You're on mute, Sunny. Can't hear you.
What a Ronnie. Okay. Hi, Rachel. I'm quite interested in speaking to you at some point, if you don't mind, because that'd be the next steps for Leo one day. He's 17. He has autism, and I'm obviously his mum. Yeah, he's got siblings, 20 and 14, going on 20, you know, the girl. So yeah, that's me and Leo. He's at Stamford College currently, and I'm having a few problems there. So yeah, his next steps we're looking at is hopefully Huntingdon College, as they seem to do a course that I've struggled to find anywhere on creative industries. And so I'd struggled to find him a course for computers, which you'd think is simple enough, but he's in the middle. He's not high enough able to do the level 1 course, and they don't do another course lower than that. So we've been batted back and forth through the system. So I'm thinking about day opportunities and how he's supported in adult life.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Deborah?
You're on mute, Deborah. Sorry.
Can't hear
We're all doing it.
I turned myself off as instructed. I'm Deborah Clements. I'm also a parent representative for Family Voice, and I'm a parent carer for 3 young men, not my birth children, but that doesn't really matter. Now aged 14, nearly 18 and 19, all who have neurodiverse conditions. The eldest has autism, and he and his brother have an FAS diagnosis as well. And the younger one has no diagnosis at the moment, but he has SEN and ADHD traits. So it keeps me quite busy. And I'm just here today because it sounded like an interesting topic, and I thought it would be something that, you know, I'd like to learn more about.
Thank you,
And
Deborah.
contribute
Jason?
if I can.
Say again? Was that
Jason,
me or Nazri?
your intro.
Hi, Nazri. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Newell. I'm a Family Voice parent rep and have some interest in the topic as well. So,
Thank you, Jason. Danina?
Yes, I have a son who has autism, he's 22. He had problems in the colleges. When Sunny mentioned Stanford College, that was absolutely awful experience for him. And, you know, they were absolutely not at all helpful. And the very similar situation, actually, we are struggling to find a course for him, which in Peterborough and around Peterborough is not easy to find. I don't know about online courses though. And I'm interested in this subject, which you announced it will be today.
Thank you. Dorota?
Hi, I'm Dorota. I'm a parent representative for Family Voice Peterborough. I'm also a mom and a carer for 2 children with disabilities. One of my sons have type 1 diabetes and the other have ASD. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Dorota. And finally, Patience.
Hi, good morning. We're a provider of supported living based in Hampstead. Just interested in the subject itself, and I just thought I'd come in and join in and see families and those we support, those we might be supporting in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So Tony and Fiona have kindly joined in. They're the commissioners. They're the ladies that we have lots of questions for. So yes, so please complete the feedback. If there's any questions, you can put it in the chat. And then you can, I believe there is a way of putting your hand up on Zoom. So if you could put your hand up, but if you can mute yourself whilst Fiona and Tony are delivering their presentation, and then I have a couple of questions that I might put forward, and then if you've got any questions you can put them in the chat or you can put your hands up. So I'll hand over to Tony and Fiona.
Hi, I'll just do an introduction. I'm Tony Borden. I'm a Commissioner for Learning Disabilities and Autism at Cambridgeshire County Council. We cover Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in our function. So yeah, that's why we're here today. And I'm coming to talk about a bit about home care. I will sort of cover a bit here, but basically, I think my colleague Fiona is going to come and talk about supported living. We have home care contracts, domiciliary care contracts in Peterborough, which are ending early next year. And we're going through the process at the moment of trying to put in place new contracts and new specifications, so how the service would be delivered and what we're looking for and what's all important to people. So Fiona and I are kind of working on the learning disability areas. That home care contract does cover older people and covers mental health as well, and it covers people supporting their own home and in the community and supported living. So it's quite broad ranging, and this is the LD side is the bit that Fiona and I are looking at. I'll let Fiona talk now.
Hi, yeah. So my name's Fiona, and I'm one of the commissioning managers working with Tony, and so I predominantly focus on accommodation solutions. So that is things like housing related support, supported living, obviously, which we've talked a little bit about, and residential care. And so when we started doing our LD vision, which I don't recognise all of you from that work. We did some work back last year and in the summer, and from that it was really clear that housing was a really important topic for people, really concerned. So we are continuing with that piece of work. So a couple of things that we're doing are our housing needs assessment. So that is looking at what our needs sort of going forward is going to be. So there's a couple of sort of national reports. So there's things like Langbusen, if you're really interested in things like that, and or perhaps having difficulty sleeping, that you can read, and that sort of talks about the future supported living is sort of, you know, more favourable at this time than sort of residential, and that's the sort of trend, and also kind of like the trend for more people wanting to live by themselves rather than in the sort of traditional shared accommodation that traditionally supported living has been. So our sort of internal early indications probably match that, and we're hoping that a sort of draft of what our sort of data and our population predictions will look like will be available probably the end of this year, probably around September time. With that, that's going to then feed into our sort of overall accommodation strategy, and that will be our sort of commissioning intentions, you know, how we're going to sort of meet that need. So someone mentioned fetal alcohol syndrome. So they're people that have sort of a specific kind of needs that don't often are quite diverse and different from say sort of like learning disabilities or autism, and sort of like a group in themselves. So it will be looking about how we can meet those needs, because they're slightly different to the sort of learning disabilities that we're traditionally sort of commissioning for. So all of that sort of like going on, and a bit of work that's also that we'll be looking at is around having a sort of set of standards or expectations for the build itself. So if we think about things like autism, when someone is considering developing a service or a building for people with autism, thinking about you know, sensory needs, so there's like things like the lighting, things about sort of like electric like dimmer switches, and the noise that can make can be really challenging for people with autism. So we're hoping to have a sort of set of expectations that obviously could be adapted for a you know, particular person, but a sort of general guideline. So we're looking at those work. And then I think Tony mentioned, obviously at the moment our contracts in Peterborough for home well, domiciliary care are being reviewed. We're looking to go out to the market. Is it July? July, and then there's the new contracts will start in February. The timescales may change. So as part of that kind of work, we're then looking at kind of what we want to tell the market. Now, what I would say, obviously Tony will cover kind of the sort of home care aspect, but the supported living, obviously we've had lots and lots of feedback about landlords and buildings and that sort of thing, and I'm not saying that we're not dealing with that. We are going to look at that as part of our accommodation strategy. In terms of what we're doing right now, our contract as a local authority is with the people that deliver that care and support element, and then the contract, the tenancy agreement is the contract that is between the sort of individual and the landlord. There are some problems with that. We're aware of that. We are looking at it, but there's a challenge around how, in terms of this specification of these expectations, how we can manage that. So some of the things that I have looked at including into the sort of spec, it's like a job sort of specification is around that we would expect the people who are delivering the care and support to have something like a service level agreement. We would expect them to be a registered provider, and then there's also been obviously some concern around sort of I don't know how to phrase it, but the matching. So, you know, if you've got your own tenancy and then someone's coming into your to your home as a new person that you're going to live with, how that is managed by those parties that are involved, and we're going to ask that as one of the questions. So really that's kind of like a whistle stop tour, and we'd sort of like welcome any questions, but then it's really just about hearing from you, you know, have we got kind of like the spec right? Is there things that you want to change? The questions that we've proposed, I think the survey sort of went out with the sort of questions that we were thinking about. Are they right? Are they wrong? And how we can move forward together, really.
Thank you, Fiona. So I have a couple of statements, I guess there's two. So my adult daughter is going to live in a property that I own, that I decorated and obviously designed for her in mind. It's a 3-bed, and we've been working with another client who we've matched. So over a period of 2 years, they've got to know each other and they're going to be living in the house. The only challenge is, though, that if family members own the property, it's very difficult to get housing benefit. And there has to be some, I know there has to be some integrated work with housing and care and all of that kind of stuff. But housing benefit seems to be one of the key things, doesn't it? Because what we're finding is that often families, that tenancy agreements will be done and then housing benefit will only give a certain amount, and then they're being asked to top up. Or I've had families where the provider's been the same, the accommodation is theirs, and once if the care package is broken down, they're essentially homeless, and that becomes a problem. So I appreciate it's really complex and everything, but would you be liaising with housing benefits to be able to somehow, because I know there is a separate thing, isn't there, for people who have needs and are receiving housing benefit? There's a separate criteria or something. So it seems to be there seems to be a lot of issues around. So if family members are saying, well, actually I've got a property that I own that's near my family and they're already familiar with it and I want my child to live there, but actually what we're being told is, well, you're not entitled to benefits because it's an informal arrangement, which makes it really challenging, because you just think, well, they're entitled to that benefit, and I've just saved you an awful lot of money because actually it's housing that I've already provided and all I want is the care package. How does that come into the whole? I'm sure it does, but how are you considering that aspect of things?
So there's probably two things that they're there. So there's it is complex, firstly, so it's a complicated system for anyone to navigate, so well done for you to try and take that on. So there is something called supported exempt rents, which is where, and these are the rules that are set by the government, so we might be able to influence, and there is a piece of work going on. The government is reviewing those rents and how they are set, and that's if you are particularly interested in it, I would recommend going onto the housing regulator website where the reports are published. And so they, in those situations where there is a tenancy agreement with a registered provider, they have to be a registered not-for-profit provider, and there's a tenancy agreement, and then the care and support is delivered by a provider who's on our framework. They can claim the supported exempt rents, and that means that they're exempt from the sort of ordinary rent rules, and I mean, they still have to be reasonable, but they can charge a little more, and the whole amount will be covered.
Fantastic. So the regulation bit, the framework, because I understand that it's not just regulation, is it? The framework, to be on the framework for the local authority, it's to do about cost, isn't it? Is there that element to it? So you could be CQC regulated, but actually can't be on the framework or do you just go on the framework straight away once you're CQC regulated?
No, so there's two different elements. So we don't have a framework for housing providers. They're regulated by the housing regulator, which is a national body. the care and support element is the framework, and providers have to apply, and that's the sort of specification that we're talking about, is they have to apply and meet the criteria that we're talking about in the specification to be able to get onto that framework.
Sorry, last one, and that's it. So who would be actually responsible for the accommodation being adapted for the individual? Will it be the housing regulatory body that will be regulating the landlord to make sure that repairs are done, make sure the house meets the client's needs, and the care provider is only responsible for providing the care, and that's it? And the tenant can choose, actually, can the tenant then choose who they go with, so they're not tied down to the right? Okay, that's brilliant.
So that is how it should work. In reality,
yes,
it may be slightly different, and your choice will be limited by what the market can provide. But in reality, you know, in theory, yes, that's exactly how it could work. What I was going to just add is the situation you're talking about with housing benefit. Often there is a top up if the landlord isn't a registered provider. So in some situations, the care and support provider and the landlord are the same, and in those situations they have to charge the rent that's in line with housing benefit will only pay whatever the standard for that authority, the district is. And so often there is the top up. And I think the situation you're talking about is where someone owns their own home and then they want to, or you own the home and you're effectively renting to your daughter under a private landlord. And because you're not a registered provider, then that will mean that you can't, you'd have to charge rent in the same way.
But what they told me was that because it's an informal arrangement and she's my daughter, she's not entitled to it, which means the burden of the mortgage is on my shoulders, which makes me quite frustrated and angry actually, because I just think, hang on a bit, I've made this house suitable for my daughter, I've saved you thousands and thousands of pounds, but all you're now saying to me is that I've got to cover the mortgage and the rent of my house that I'm living in just so that my daughter can live independently, and it kind of feels really unfair. Because all I'm saying to him is that I could put a tenancy agreement together. It's not a problem. I could even set up a company. It's not a problem, and say, well, I'm renting it via the company. But it just feels unfair, because I know of many families that would say, well, actually, I've got a house over there and I would want my child to live there. But if you're telling me that I've got to then put up the cost, which I can't afford, because already I'll be topping up the benefits that my child is getting, which is not great, is it? It's PIP and ESA and universal credit, but I'll be topping up that with to pay the bills and the rising costs and everything and the mortgage. But you're telling me I'm not entitled, yet that company over there is going to make a load of money out of my child if I handed my child over to them. So it just feels a little bit unfair. So I think that there has to be something in the contract that stipulates that actually the value of parent carers, and I guess this is why I do this piece of work with Family Voice, is that when parent carers are joining in, the value we bring in is that actually we know that young person, but we have resources as well. It's not that you're doing something to us, we're doing it together. And so that is the massive issue that I'm finding with a lot of it, is it's almost like, well, here you are, we're doing this for you, and you're thinking, well, hang on a bit, I've got resources I can bring to the table, but you have to make this slightly easier for me, not harder. And at the moment it feels like, well, you're not entitled to benefits because it's an informal arrangement, but you're sitting there thinking, well, hang on a bit. So that has to be addressed somewhere in that contract, that if families have a property that, and I know it's a big piece of work, because you might have to speak to housing benefits and whatever, and you don't make the legislation around housing benefits. But it has to be somewhere where big companies are not just swallowing it all up by saying, here's my 5-bedroom property, we can put 5 people in there, and the local authority saying, well, hey, that's cheap and cheerful, we'll just put 5 people in there. Actually, it has to happen. There has to be co-production right from the beginning to when that young person is in the house, and continues right the way through their life, because things change, don't they? Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm ranting. I'm going very political.
No,
I'll
no,
stop
it's
now. I'm
no,
done.
no, it's really good. So so probably in response to that, you're absolutely right. That particular situation is becoming more well. I've heard of more than yourself in that sort of situation. So that's definitely something we need to consider, how we can work with families, you know, to support them, and whether that's you know, working with kind of like our district, you know, who sets in the housing benefit, working about a process of, you know, get you registered or helping you with a tenancy agreement or something else. That will need to be dealt with as part of like our accommodation strategy, which I said is probably a long-term piece of work and needs to be thought through. And there'll definitely be some co-production around that, about those. The sort of specification that I was talking about, the sort of care and support elements, probably there'll be limited role that we could incorporate in for those situations at this current time, but definitely aware of kind of like that situation, and want to support, because you're right, it you know, it's benefit for everyone.
Thank you, Fiona. Deborah, sorry, Deborah, got a question.
Yeah, just a couple of points, Fiona, that I picked up on from your sort of presentation. First of all, going back to FAS,
yeah,
and you talked about it being sort of a separate area that you were considering. Can I just ask if you have anybody with expertise in the FAS community actually involved in that?
So we will do, not currently. So it was just as you were talking, I think it made me, we've got another authority that I used to work with. They were at a few people with visa. I always get the letters in the wrong way, so visa syndrome. So I was sort of aware of kind of like the challenges, and it just got me thinking that we need to do something. They need to be incorporated in this piece of work, but probably as a separate group to look at those needs. And absolutely, as part of that accommodation strategy, we'll need to have someone from that community to help us co-produce that, and what those needs are.
Because we do have, yeah, I mean, you're probably aware, we do have a sort of a local support group, and that is actually run by a person who is sort of a national expert, has attended parliamentary committees and has been quite forward in sort of taking forward the case for support with FASD.
Brilliant. Okay. I wasn't. What are their contact? Or pop the in the chat, and then we can I'll get in contact.
Yeah. Okay.
Jason, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Nazreen. Going back to what you just said, some of the stuff you said, Fiona. So if you have power of attorney, which I'm assuming Nazreen has for her daughter, how does that all work when it comes to finances and housing benefit and that? If they go into what's the word I'm looking for?
Supported living.
Housing organization. Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I'm going to know. You probably need just sort of like a social worker to answer some of the questions. But what do you mean? What's the sort of crux of your question?
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, because I'm assuming Nazreen's got power of attorney, or because obviously some of the.
So Jason, what I've been told is it's irrelevant because I'm her mum. It's an informal arrangement. So legally, if I have power attorney or even appointee for her finances, what they're saying is that because I'm her mum and the property is on my name, that the tenancy agreement is null and void because it's an informal arrangement. And I'm saying, well, it's not an informal arrangement. I would never have let that property out anyway because we were living in it. I've actually moved out to rent another property, so that property is my daughter's home. It's where she lives in, and she'll live in it for however long she's alive. So well, technically, in my view, she should have a tenancy agreement and I should get housing benefit. But what's happening is they're saying, well, no, because it's an informal arrangement, we're not going to give it to you, but you've got to pay the mortgage and the rent and everything else on top. And you're just thinking, well, that just seems really unfair. And so I guess, and you know that I run Alpha Autism Care Limited, so it's a separate company and I provide the care. But to me, it just feels like if I wasn't her mum, I would get the housing benefit, I would get all of the package, happy days. But because I'm her mum, it's almost like, well, no, we're not going to do it. And you just think, well, actually, that isn't right. So I'm trying to find a way, not around it, but I'm trying to say is that if parents are playing an active role in trying to provide accommodation for their child, which if she wasn't autistic, I would have done it anyway for my other daughters. It would be like, here's a house, stay in it or whatever, but you still pay me rent. But because they'll be able to work, they'll pay me rent. But because Mother's disabled, it's almost like, well, no, she can't get it. But housing benefit, there has to be a way, because at the moment it seems like, it just feels almost really difficult and challenging when actually we're saving money, we're saving the government and we're saving the local authority an awful lot of money when we're saying, here's a property, I've set it up just for my child, but the housing benefit is saying no. So that's a difficulty I've had, is navigating the whole system to say this needs to happen. But yeah, appointee, deputyship, they're saying is totally irrelevant. It's basically her mum, and therefore you can't. Hang on.
Well, what would happen if it was in her name then?
Oh, I can't. So she hasn't got capacity. So I can put it in a trust fund and I could do all the rest of it. Or I can put it in my daughter's name, the younger daughter's name. But the principle is still the same. They're saying it's a family member and it's informal. I'm thinking, well, who decides whether it's an informal or a formal arrangement? If I've got a tenancy agreement that I'm saying here it is. But then, the reality is she won't be responsible for paying the bills, would she? Because she's got no capacity and I'm her appointee, I manage the finances. So it's a bit muddy. It's very muddy, but it shouldn't be muddy. It should be very clear that I own that property. She's living in it as a tenant, and there'll be somebody else living in it as a tenant who will be paying a lodger's rent, which is fine. Hers went through absolutely fine, but Muddy isn't entitled to it, which seems a bit unfair. But it has to be a way of including it in this, which is really difficult. But I think it's the value of parent carers, isn't it, in the whole process, rather than just getting the information from us right at the beginning and then saying, well, that's it, we're now going to do this for you. And I think, you know what, it has to carry on right towards the end, because we're still going to be part of our children's lives as long as they carry on. We need to know if there's damage to the property or if they're, I don't know, physically deteriorated, that the house needs to be adapted. We need to know who the landlord is. We need to know who the care provider is, what their roles are, because if my child is sick, for example, and they can't come downstairs, I need to know how I'm going to do that. Or if she's epileptic and I need a downstairs room now because she's falling down the stairs, I need to be part of that process and those meetings with the landlord. Because at the moment, it's actually most parents don't know who the landlord is. Most of the times they know who the care provider is, but they actually have very little to do with the landlord. And you just think actually they need to know, because if that property is damaged, if there's damp or if there's access issues, they should be able to call that landlord up and say, hang on, hello, can you please? They shouldn't be able to go through a social worker or a masses of systems. So it's a bit of a rant, but what I'm saying is that whatever contract the owner or Tony want to put together, parent carers should have an active role right the way through, not just for gathering the information, but actually this is an alternative. This is an option that's there. Parents are offering this option, but it's actually quite challenging at the moment.
Yes.
So who else has got their hand up? Sunny, you've got your hand up. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Done it again. This is something I was thinking about, because Leah's 17. My eldest has more or less moved out because he's got a girlfriend, and my daughter's 14. So in a few years, I could be effectively, they could all be old enough. If he didn't have extra needs and need the support and can't live alone, then that would be it. And I could do what I will and what have you. As all of you, we can't. So what worries me is, like you said, I want Leo needs to be somewhere familiar. But if that means that I've got to continue to support him through adult life with his housing, then how does that look? If he was in a rented accommodation, a landlord, and they decided they wanted to sell after 2 years, change is massive for
Absolutely.
autism and a lot of other disabilities. It's difficult enough in the system. I'm so worried because I've already had to learn the system for education, which I'm still not familiar with. And I keep falling down when it comes to it with college, and I still struggle. And I'm if I'm totally honest, I'm scared about what I'm going to face when it comes to trying to get him what he needs for adult life, day opportunities, living, working, voluntary, whichever, all of it. But more so, like you said, the fact that you're offering a stable environment for them to live in, just because you're their parent, that shouldn't come into it. Can you get onto some sort of register then as a provider? How difficult is it to get onto a provider's register? What do you need to do to tick the provider box? Do we know?
So what I've done is I've set up a company now, which is basically an accommodation. It's a property company. So my plan is that I will in the future buy properties by that company, and so I will be a landlady, as it were, and I will appeal. So with the housing benefit thing, I'm going down the appeal route and saying, well, actually, it's not an informal arrangement. It's as formal can be. What else do you want me to do? And if I need to get a solicitor involved, I'll get a solicitor involved, and it will be
good on you.
Formal arrangement, and she's entitled to housing benefit, and she should get it. So that's the only thing I could think of at the moment was that what else can I do?
Because you're having to pay rent for yourself, and you'd be paying your own mortgage if you were. I think it's awful.
And I just think parent-led services, I'm biased, but parent-led services are better.
Saving the legwork for a start.
Absolutely. So that's the plan anyway. We'll see how it goes, but I think it's really important that at the moment, the more I speak to local authority officials, the more I realise that it's so important that parent carers, absolutely fantastic that we're involved right at the beginning and they want to engage with us, but it needs to be that we're not pigeonholed as we were here to help you, come on here. Actually, we've got a lot of resources to offer, and it's use that. So sorry, Rachel, did you put your hand up? Oh, so you're done. I've lost count of how many. Deborah, are you putting your hand up again?
Yeah, I did have another one there actually, but it's all right to sort of. I was just going to ask. Fiona was talking about the review of domiciliary care contracts that are coming up, and I was just interested to know what happens with those people, those young people who are currently sort of using the existing services that are commissioned. What happens when they're renewed and that contract is no longer in existence? Do they have to move?
No. So so the way it works would be so you're hold on, let me start again. So you're talking about if you're in supported living and you've got your care and support provider and say that care and support provider didn't apply for our new contract or wasn't successful, what would happen then? Is that the question? Yeah. So if they had a sort of tenancy that we've talked about with whoever the landlord, they would remain in that accommodation. Probably the local authority would have to make a decision about whether we continued with that provider, the care and support provider, and we would probably need to understand the reasons and work with the parents and the individuals as to why that provider hadn't applied or wasn't successful. So if there was was there a safeguarding concern, or was it something else, and we'd have to work together to sort of decide what the best solution would be. So the available options would either be that we would have a separate contract, and they just wouldn't be part of our framework, but they'd have a specific contract for that person if that was the best option. And another option may be that another provider who was successful on the framework took over that contract, and the staff probably would be TP'd over if we thought that was the best option. The challenge with that scenario would potentially be if the care and support provider also owned the property, because in effect they're both the landlord and
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So again, in that scenario, we'd have to have a conversation with the individuals, with the provider, and the advocates, the parents, and we'd have to make a collective decision about what was in the best interest. And it may be that we would just have to have a separate contract to allow that person to stay there. But an alternative option could be that we could work with another registered provider to take it over, and another care and support provider to deliver that care and support element. But if everyone was agreement that the best thing for that person and those individuals was to stay in that property, which, as we know, there's quite a demand for property, and it's quite a challenge to find suitable properties, I would assume it probably would be, then we would try and find the best solution that we could.
Fiona, is it possible
Okay,
is it possible to actually, in the contract or whatever it is, to say to providers that actually the tenancy agreement is very much separate to the care package, so that if things like that do happen, if, say, for example, the provider didn't come on the framework for the care part, they couldn't essentially evict the tenant because the tenancy agreement is separate? Can that happen? Can that?
So that's so absolutely, that is something that I have added to the specification. Yeah.
Is there any way in which we can have there is any sort of community for parents to raise concerns about supported living? My daughter is basically very happy there, but some of the issues that I've had to raise, I can't believe for a minute, are things that are unique to her. They're things that must apply in lots and lots of different situations. But my own circumstances, there is no family in any meaningful sense here in Peterborough. And I don't actually know any other parents with children, adult children, in supported living. And therefore, having a network of people that you can actually bounce ideas off and say, I've had this particular challenge, have you got that? And actually raise some of these issues in a common format. I'm just wondering if that system exists, because I end up either having to go individually to the manager of the care provider, or on occasions to social services, and on one famous occasion through a formal complaint. But there isn't that. I'm not aware of a network. Now, is that something I'm missing, or are we just?
Rachel, Family Voice can. Sorry, Fiona. Sorry. Family Voice can do that. We can put a group of parents together if that's what you want. Yeah.
I think that would be a very useful thing, because I respond to the various Family Voice questionnaires, but I find that they are often. I guess it reflects the membership, but addressed more to children under 18.
Yeah.
Now, children under 18 with learning disabilities grow up and become adults with learning disabilities. So it may just be a reflection of the population dynamics, but that network is something that I think I would find really useful to have an opportunity to. I mean, you would have an opportunity to share your particular concerns about the finances and the tenancy. I've got issues about sort of the general nature of care in different ways, and yeah, I think we would have lots in common, because the other parents of youngsters roughly the same age as my daughter, who I know, the youngsters are all living at home, and with parents saying, no way is Susie and Johnny ever going to be living in supported living, whereas I was at the point of, as a single mum, of absolute desperation, and she had to move.
Yeah,
And
no, we'll organise if that's what you're looking for, because I think that's what I felt as well. So we can organise that by Family Voice if that's helpful.
that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Great. What a good solution.
Are there any other questions? Deborah, you still got your hand up. Tony, Fiona, do
No,
you have
sorry,
any
sorry, I
thoughts?
should have taken it down. It's going down. The
Do
hand
you
is
have
down.
any specific things you'd like from us? Any more than what we've already given you?
No, it's all been really, really helpful. If we have time and Rachel doesn't mind, I wouldn't mind hearing a bit more about how you got your daughter into supported living and kind of like the journey, and yeah, I would like to hear. Yeah.
I'm happy to share. I think I've shared quite widely on this subject before. Whoops, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong buttons here. Oh, I've just minimized everybody. Wait a minute. Hang on. Oh gosh, I've done something terrible. There we go. I've got you back. I've got you back. I shrunk you all to a tiny little bit of the screen. Okay, I'm happy to share that if other people don't mind.
Yes, please.
Okay. My daughter is 20. She's 21. She'll be 22 in the summer. Her learning disabilities are such that she was a Phoenix School, as it then was, pupil until she was 19. She's currently at City College and Helping Hands as a sort of shared daycare provision. And her father left when she was 16, so I had about 5 years on my own. There is no other family here, so I was very much providing all her care. And for reasons that I've never really got to the bottom of, she became increasingly violent towards me. And as you know, anybody in this situation knows, you have no life to yourself if you're doing all the caring. And of course, when we then got to the pandemic point, provision all collapsed, although actually full marks to Peterborough, most of it came back, and she continued to go into City College and to Helping Hands throughout the pandemic, even if transport stopped, and I just did the transport. But the plan always had been, even when I was still with her father, that she would in due course move into supported living. And I just got to the point where it was a case of it has to happen now, because otherwise, you know, the situation is getting worse. I went to social services and said, basically, help. A place was identified. Social worker was very good, has been excellent. And a place was found with a care company. And the care company, when they identified the particular location, and it was sharing with one other young woman, the care company's view was that my daughter was not a good match to the other person in the house. Well, you know, I didn't know any of that, but I took their word for it. But they did, on the same occasion, say, actually, we have another house much nearer to where I live in Peterborough, where they had a vacancy, which I think must have only just arisen, and wasn't on the social services list. I went around and looked at that property, met the carers, met the other then 2 women there. I specified that I wanted Kirsty in an all-female environment, and I wanted roughly the other service users being roughly her age and roughly her ability level. Yeah. And that's what happened. I saw it myself. I took her. We had those conversations, and I decided that it was a satisfactory place for her. The fact that it was near was just wonderful. And I made that decision in January 2020, so just pre-pandemic. It then took 6 months and I have absolutely no idea why it took 6 months for the costings to be done for how much, basically the time that the care company would need to provide. So how many hours was one-to-one, how many hours was shared care, how the arrangements would be term time. It would be one set of arrangements, but during the college holidays, it needed to be a different set of arrangements. Well, it wasn't a very difficult mathematical sum, but it took weeks and weeks and weeks. And at home with somebody who is hitting you black and blue every day through a pandemic wasn't, well, it wasn't fun. But it was very much about me being in need, desperate need, and asking, and just having to push. It wasn't something that was, although it was offered in the sense of, in principle, this is available, it was never offered. It was something I went and asked for and grabbed hold of, and yes, kept on pushing for, because I knew it was something that I needed. That the decision, I thought for quite a long time about, okay, Kirsty moved to independent living when she's ready. And eventually I kind of got to a point of thinking, okay, will I recognize what ready looks like? How do I define when she's ready? What is the thing that's going to tell me she's ready? And the light bulb came on, and I thought, actually, there isn't anything. I could be waiting from now to eternity to recognize ready. This is about when I'm ready. And boy, oh boy, was I not ready. So there was this long period of, and the data got lost. The care provider lost the numbers. They've had to phone me up more than once and said, can you just remind me? So what are we saying? What's the sums? That whole process was not well organized. And it took 6 months. So I made the decision in January, and she moved at the end of June. Once we actually got to the point where she was moving, that was then incredibly smooth. The room, of course, was provided empty, so it was unfurnished. So although the communal spaces were furnished, her own room was unfurnished, and I had to provide the furniture. And because she was the third person in a modern house, the room that was available to her was actually very small. She's moved since within the house. Somebody's moved out, and there's only 2 of them now. And she moved up into a bigger room. But I had to provide the furniture, and it was, I mean, I fortunately had a friend who was an interior designer, and I called her in to put together a package of adequate furniture, courtesy of IKEA, that was very small, and would actually come up with a nice design that worked in a very, very small room. Had I not had that sort of help, I think, from a friend, that would have been quite difficult, and made more so because it was in a pandemic and nobody was delivering anything. But we got there. I joined everybody, so the college, Helping Hands, even our father, we all had a social story, which actually at that point speech therapy helped us write, to explain to my daughter what was happening with pictures, and we all had the same text. She only knew about a fortnight before she moved, and actually even for her that was probably too long.
Okay.
She can't cope with uncertainty. It's either this or it's that, and if the answer is no, that's fine. You just need to be clear if the answer is no. She struggles with maybe, we'll have a barbecue on Sunday if it's sunny. No. Either we're having a barbecue on Sunday or we're not. We can't do if it's sunny. So she had a very short run-in, but that worked for her. Other people, clearly, that's exactly what you don't do. But for her, that worked. The care at that transition point was absolutely excellent. We had the day in question worked out. It was the day she was going to Helping Hands. I took her into Helping Hands, said goodbye to her. I then took her suitcase to the house, and a member of the Helping Hand staff took her back to her house. It was done in a very efficient, matter-of-fact way, and it worked. I probably saw her that night. It coincided with her birthday, and I think I went down around the next day with birthday cake. And it all worked. I've had a degree of confusion over housing benefit again, because she doesn't get housing benefit. But I've been told when the assessment had been done of her finances that at the point when she transferred to universal credit, to then apply for housing benefit. Some months in, she applied for universal credit, which she now gets. I applied for housing benefit, only to be told by the council after much confusion that she wasn't eligible for housing benefit, and I had to claim it back from universal credit. So there is real confusion within the council, relevant department, about who does and doesn't get housing benefit under what set of circumstances. There was a bit with the care provider around the sort of governance arrangements, which didn't really seem to ever happen. So although I signed the tenancy agreement, and this is a case where the care provider and the tenant and the landlord, I think, are more or less one and the same, or two tightly interrelated companies. I signed it, but I never got a copy back. I didn't ever pay rent. Well, she didn't ever pay rent. I am her deputy. She never paid rent. They forgot to charge me for the rent. I've had to chase to pay the rent, and ended up having to pay 9 months, 11 months back rent. There is an ongoing conversation which is still not resolved around her share of the utility bills. And that is a conversation between the care provider and the council, which they do not seem to be able to resolve. I've paid a backlog of share of utility bills once, but that must be now 11 months ago, 10, 11 months ago. And I have no idea what the problem is, but I really don't feel I should be continuing to chase for that. So I'm stopping chasing. Somebody will come up with it. Do realise, I suspect her flatmate, her housemate, is paying the entire utility bills, because the council is the appointee for that other person. So it would be helpful if that was sorted. There's logistics things that have not worked. The care is certainly adequate, and in some cases better than adequate. There have been a lot of staff changes in the actual carers over recent weeks, and that's decisions that the particular company has made. And I'm perfectly happy with that. There's an ongoing issue about diet, which I think we've now got on the run. And it's this business of Kirsty is an adult and therefore should be making her own decisions. Yes, absolutely. But sometimes, and when it comes to diet, her decisions are not in her best interests. Therefore, somebody has to intervene and say no when it comes to excess chocolate. And that doesn't always happen. And that's one of the things I can't believe she's the only person in a supported living house for whom that is an issue. I continue to make decisions about her daytime activities so that she does go to college. She's doing very well at City College. They're happy to have her. Long may that continue. But those are decisions that I make. Helping Hands, again, I'm very happy she continues to go there. That works. But those are decisions I make. I make decisions around her various recreational activities. And then the care company arrange for her to go, assuming Kirsty continues to want to do them, which she does. So she's got a couple of sports clubs that she enjoys, and that largely works. She can be at a loose end, I think, quite a bit when those activities aren't happening. So during the college holidays, we've just had a fortnight, Easter holidays, not desperately exciting time for her. And I think more could be done in terms of activities for that. And I know that's something that the care company are looking to and looking for some extra staffing. And that's, as far as I know, is an ongoing conversation between the care company and the council in terms of the costings, to give her some extra one-to-one hours to do additional things when her housemate doesn't always want to do them, so they don't have to do things together. There's a sort of a governance bit that I only realised with retrospect didn't happen around what happens if something goes wrong. So I never had, at the point Kirsty moved, a conversation with anybody about if you're not happy about anything, or there's something going wrong here, this is how you address that. It never got an emergency out of office phone number until I realised I needed one and I didn't have it. I've learnt trial and error and worked my way through it, and I've done a whole lot, obviously, over that transition between leaving school and, you know, getting through 18, 21 and the whole finance package. So it's not been easy, but I've got there. Is she happier? Yes, I would say I'm sure she is. She couldn't have made a decision that she wanted to do this because it's a concept of living of which she had no knowledge. She didn't know such options were available. But I think she's happy. She's definitely growing in independence. Was it good for both of us? Undoubtedly. It's, I think, basically a happy house. There were 3 of them, and the oldest lady chose to move out because she wanted her own place, which she has. They've been, you know, pandemic and bubbles have kind of restricted things a bit. So the 3 of them still visit each other's house because they are in COVID terms a bubble, which is good. But there's only 2 of them in the house. My daughter's moved into a bigger bedroom where the other lady left. There's still only 2, and the 3rd bedroom, the very small one, is empty. And I think probably that's suiting everybody quite well. Nobody else has come in. I would like to have some involvement in who else moved in. And certainly my daughter's social worker has asked to be involved in decisions about who else moves in. There was somebody considered, and then for whatever reason, that's not gone ahead. The 2 of them have been on their own there with care now for 12 months, maybe longer. And it works. It's stable. The two youngsters get on well. They do some things together, but not everything together.
Yeah.
And it works. It's certainly a good move. I would say for both of us, but not something that my daughter could have asked for because she had no concept of such an option. So it's, you know, as a mum, you know, for most mums of 21-year-olds, you know, your 21-year-old is moving away from you. They are choosing to leave because they've got other things they want to do. When you're a mum in this situation, they're not able to choose to leave. You are having to step back, or you're having to push. So as a mum, it's a very different emotional position to be in to the mums of youngsters without these challenges and disabilities. But if I knew more people in a similar situation, as I've just said, that would be really useful, because I can't believe some of the issues are not common. And therefore there's a lot we could learn from each other, and different providers can learn from each other. You know, if X can do it, why can't Y do it? But basically it works. It was definitely a good move. The finances are now settled down. The rent is being invoiced for every month. The utility bills question remains. There was earlier this year, there was a complete mix-up, and she was unintentionally left entirely on her own, daughter in the house. That was what resulted in a formal complaint, which has been addressed. And it was a mess. But my daughter did the right thing, and she phoned me. I wasn't on hand. I was away. I was in Scotland, And I had to resolve the problem by phone, and I just phoned everybody I could possibly know to solve the problem. It's only happened once, and as I say, it resulted in a formal complaint, which will be on the record. It's not perfect, but it's an awful lot better for both of us than it was. So, and and nice things happen. So her 21st birthday last year, she wanted a barbecue she got. It's the middle of the summer, pandemic or no pandemic, she had a barbecue in the garden with those people she wanted to have there. It was beautifully done.
Yeah.
And she was a grown-up young woman who hosted her own barbecue.
Yeah.
One very proud mum. So
Yeah.
when it works, it's great. And
yeah, that's probably the key, isn't it? When it works.
When it works, it's great. And I would say 85% of the time it works. If we could solve this problem about her diet, I think we'd be at 90%. So it's not perfection, but she, as I say, she'll have been there nearly 2 years. It's not been easy. You just have to keep on at it. But it works. And as I say, for me, transformational.
Brilliant. That was really, really helpful. Thank you. So I think for me, there's a couple of kind of things that I want to take away. So one of the things that you mentioned kind of like early on was that you sort of weren't really aware of the options, or they'd said it could be an option, but there wasn't sort of really a follow-up. And really, I think what should be happening probably around kind of 14, 15, when they sort of go into transition services, saying, what the long term, obviously, 16-year-old probably, for some people it might be worth it, but think about what the long-term options might be that you might want to have more information about, and to start exploring those early about what that might look like, because particularly for people with complex needs, we know that it's really difficult to sort of sometimes find somewhere that's going to meet their needs. So there's probably no use getting to breaking point and then saying, oh, I need something, because particularly if something needs to be built, then that's so that I thought was a good point that I need to follow up with.
Yeah, I mean, if you have somebody who's in a wheelchair and it's ground floor access only, I don't know what the options are. I mean, yes, those aren't challenges that I've had to deal with, and there's not great medical problems.
Yes, yeah. Yes, I thought that was a really good point. I thought kind of like initially when you were speaking, but the social worker was good, and the place was found, and I thought it was quite good that the care provider said, oh, actually these people aren't a good match. That's not going to they're not going to get on. But we've got another place. I thought that's a good kind of solution.
How lucky was that? I think. I mean, I think that was pure luck.
Yeah, so yeah, that sounded like, oh yeah, that's quite good. And then obviously I was a bit disappointed that it then took six months for that sort of to be agreed, or whatever the governance was. And I need to probably go back to sort of like my operational colleagues to sort of understand why that was. It seemed like if there's a solution there, we need to understand what those barriers are, so that whatever learning it is, that we can take that away. And then obviously I think some of the things that you mentioned there around obviously housing benefit, we've spoken about that, but that's something that definitely needs to be picked up as part of our accommodation strategy. And then I think there probably is something that we can do though about making sure that parents have who to contact, if there's a problem with the property, that's the landlord. Who is the landlord? Who do we contact? What's the expectation? So there's definitely we can probably do that.
Who the landlord is a mystery, because it is the same address as the care provider.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's something that I think could be hopefully be sorted relatively quickly. That parents obviously need to know who it is, and then also, like you say, having for the care and support element, who that who that is and who you need to contact in emergency if there's a relation to that. So I think you know, overall, I think a sort of kind of positive story, but definitely some learning points for the local authority that we can take away and look at what we can do going forward.
Yeah. And if you can do anything about the utility bills, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that's an odd one. I've not actually come across that before, but I'm sure you're right that you're not the only one.
Oh, I can't believe that for a minute.
Just jump in at this point as well. So if you have an issue, Rachel, with the daughter's care, you know the care provider, presumably you have all their details, they're out of hours, though you did say it took a while to get those. But so when there is an issue with the environment, has the process for you been to report it to the care provider, or do you end up going, because you don't know the landlord, do you end up going through the council for stuff like that? Is that the route you kind of end up taking?
Well, the only issue with the landlord has been the non-provision of any invoices for rent. The building is fine, and she can do stairs, and she doesn't need single, ground floor access only, and she's not epileptic, so that there's the building hasn't presented many issues.
But if it did, if you had a leaky roof,
did, I would have to go to the care provider. But the contractual relationship between the two of them. Somebody has said to me that the house actually, in her case, is owned by one of the directors of the care company.
Okay.
That may not be quite right, but there's a very tight contractual relationship between the care provider and the landlord, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, but you feel there is that gap in who.
But I wouldn't know how to go to the landlord directly. No, I have no idea.
And I think that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because if you're trying to do forward planning, for example, I don't know, the landlord decides to sell the property, you probably will be the last person to know in that sort of chain of events, whoever it is. And actually, you should be the first person to know, so that you can then plan what would happen to Kirsty, or to say, well, okay, where would she then go? And you'll be able to inform her and do all the social story work, but you should know that, because if there was a concern around the property tomorrow, for example, I don't know, if the windows aren't working or the doors are broken or something, it shouldn't be on you to then go and chase or go about finding out who does what. It's, to be fair, who owns it is kind of like irrelevant, if the care provider or whatever. It's just that there has to be a separation, so that it's not, so if her care wasn't of good quality, it wouldn't be linked with the property. Her tenancy wouldn't be in danger. You'd need that security. Well, I would anyway, as a parent. I think I'd need that security to know that her tenancy is okay, and then I could choose the care, or if there was any problems with the house, I know who to go to. Yes,
I see them. Yeah, maybe because of particular circumstances, I kind of don't see that separation. I see the whole thing together. I mean, while she's been there, they have had an entirely new kitchen. Now, I knew nothing about it until the builders moved in. But I mean, in some ways, there's no reason why I should. Somebody recognised that the new kitchen was needed. Builders were found kitchen, and my daughter wasn't being asked to pay for it in any way. They got a new kitchen. They lived on takeaways for a week while the builders did whatever they do. Well, that's a function of having new kitchens. There was a conversation about similarly having a new bathroom that is needing doing. It was going to be a wet room, but nothing's happened further about that. It would be nice to see that new bathroom installed, but I'm not sure whose responsibility that is. And it's not so awful, but I'm jumping up and down about it.
But it's about, for some people, it might be preparing their young person to say, well, actually, for a week or so, you're not going to have a bath or a shower, and that you might have to come home. And that preparation work needs to happen. And that's a mixture. That's the work between the landlord and the care provider and yourself. And it may be that you might have an input in it. Your daughter might want to say what colour tiles she has in the bathroom.
Oh, absolutely. And if the answer is she's coming home for a week, and the answer is no, she's not. Exactly. I mean, the question that was put was, would I be all right if both young women moved into a different house for a week or 10 days while the plumbers did their stuff? Was that okay? And the answer was yes, undoubtedly. but it's, as I say, it's never happened. And it would be nice to know what's happening. And it really matters, not for my daughter, because the shower is over the bath and she can climb over the bath with help to have a shower. I'm not at all sure how able her housemate is to climb over the side of a bath for a shower. So yeah, but yes, I mean the communication, internal communication with the carer and the landlord and me absolutely could be better, down to little things like it matters to my daughter to really know who her carers are, who's on shift, so that if she goes out to college in the morning, when she comes in at 4 o'clock, who is it going to be? If it's somebody who's different to who it is that's packed her off in the morning, she wants to know that. She needs to know the name, and she'd like to see a photograph of the person, please. Now, there's been a lot of staff changes, but they haven't yet managed to get the mugshots, head and shoulders photographs of all the people lined up, despite it being requested, a few times. This matters to Kirsty, that clarity. Who is it that's going to be there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Or whatever point the shifts change, because it's the question she asks every time. And if, again, there's uncertainty, well, I don't know, it might be X or it might be Y, depending on the shifts. That really upsets Kirsty. So, yeah. Yeah.
Tony, would you like to say anything? Got your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm just going to make a point, so not to interrupt. We haven't really discussed the home care tenants left. It might be easier if just remind people after the meeting about the survey and the specification and the questions for the tender. I know we've focused quite a lot today. It's really, really interesting, and some really quite powerful stories actually about the supported living. I don't know what people's experiences here within this forum have been for their family member to have had support to access the community or home care. So we might not have a lot of time now sort of to go down that road, but if anyone wants to feedback now or has anything to say or wants to do it sort of outside, obviously people's experience are really important and they've been articulated really strongly here. So if there's around the supported living, if there's anything around the home care, because obviously that's the other specification we're working on as well. We do cover a lot of areas, and we sort of embellished it beyond the standard specification. So we do talk a lot about communication, consistency of carers, the same people. So a lot of the things that still apply to supported living, the people that are coming in and supporting you, that they can understand, you can understand each other, know what's in the care plans, the person's choice, all those things as well, but still really, if anybody wants to kind of feedback, do that, and we will incorporate it. And hopefully we've caught a lot in there, but it's identifying those really important aspects of it and focusing on them as well.
So Tony, home care, from my point of view, we had that when she was younger, and what we found was that a lot of the companies locally, that's why I set up our Autism Care Limited, they were very generic, and it was, you might have a carer that's used to visiting an elderly patient or an elderly client with dementia, then come along to your daughter who's sort of 15 and sort of apply the same rule, which is let me change your pad and let me just give you food and that's it, and do you know what I mean? So what I find is that there's lots of lovely agencies out there, companies out there who know dementia care, who know the visits and everything else, but when it comes to younger people with either Down syndrome, learning disabilities or whatever, just that younger age group, the companies kind of lack. There's a very generic approach out there that if I set up a care company, I'm going to cover everything because it makes business sense. But actually, when you look at it, do you actually have specialist knowledge about autism, learning disabilities or dementia? And how do you apply that? So I find things like positive behaviour support, for example, or active support and spell. When I'm talking about carers who work with my daughter, I'm talking about that kind of language, saying, actively involve her physical health. So Rachel, things like her diets, because she will overeat and she will overdrink. But what we're getting is a lot of staff that apply their background. They'll say, yeah, I've got years of experience of care. But when you actually dig deeper, it's all about elderly care. The language used is about elderly care. The whole thing is about elderly care, and you think, well, no. So I think for me, home care, that there has to be a diversity. And I know it's difficult, it's out of your control who's out there in the market, isn't it? It's literally just not in your control, but there has to be some evidence that the company is able to say that, yes, when they're dealing with this client group, they've got the knowledge base.
Well, that's what we're trying to do with this tender.
That.
Yeah, so the tender will have, sorry, my dog's, get down, Bodie.
Hello.
He's telling me it's food time. We've in the no, Bodie out. Sit down. Sorry, just let me just put him out a minute. Come on, off you go. It's usually children. Sometimes it's dogs. So we have, yeah, in the home care, there is an acknowledgement that that there are different client groups. You've got older people, they might have dementia, people with physical disabilities, mental health. Yeah. And learning disabilities and autism as well. It's a really broad ranging, it's a DPS that's going to come in. So it means the direct payment, dynamic purchasing system. It's like a framework where new providers can come on, old ones can drop off. So when we used to tender years ago with a framework, everybody would bid at the time, you were there for 4 years and nothing could really change. So if a provider wasn't working or a new one came into the local area, they couldn't get contracts with the local authority. With the DPS, it's much more flexible, so new people can come on. We are trying to also establish, that there are different client groups, and they might just need like a very standard level of support on a daily basis, but we've also got those specifications for specialist services and for specialisms in LD. So that if at the point of referral, the social worker or the broker feels that there needs to be a more specialist support service going in, and it could be communication or training or dealing with the health conditions and experience of that there should be an allocated care package that takes that into consideration. Because actually you can't go into an 85-year-old with dementia and then go into a 15-year-old next door unless you've got tremendously broad experience. Yeah. And it's not the way that works. So the intention is to get lots of different providers onto the framework in those different areas and to utilise them for it. So yeah, it's not a one size fits all. And then you should say, there are particular providers who will focus on people with learning disabilities and autism, and they're the ones that will probably pick up those more sort of specialised or those sort of more complex packages. So that's what we've tried to do within the specification as well, to take that into consideration. And people with learning disabilities, if they're getting support coming in, they might need help going to medical appointments or the dentists or with the health plans, and it's understanding that, and if they go into hospital, getting that level of support for them as well, and the understanding of sort of the issues that they face. So the specifications for all the different sort of services that are going to be tendered are being tailored to that group of clients, and that's what we're trying to do.
What is it like in terms of sort of specific challenging behaviours? Because so I've done work for other providers where we've looked at specific challenging behaviours within their client group. Is there a way where you can, instead of having, because I know there's short-term care, there's long-term care, there's emergency and there's respite, but very specific work around challenging behaviour and short pieces of work that's quite intense, and then is that an option? Because what we're finding is, so for example, we had somebody who had relapsed as schizophrenia, but they didn't quite meet the criteria for being admitted, but they weren't engaging with a mental health team, but they actually were doing really well with their support workers, but support workers didn't have the training, and this provider was saying, well, actually don't know. I kind of went in and did the piece of work around the psychosis, and that was it. But the problem was, obviously then I had to be paid privately, as it were, but the company was kind enough to do that. But I know other companies won't be doing that because that eats into their profit. But if that piece of work was done as in a separate criteria for the framework to say short-term, intense, challenging behaviour work, so that we're preventing crisis, because you know what the NHS is like, you know what the referrals around their criteria are up there, but actually the build up, and often care providers are saying, well, we don't know what to do here. We've contacted mental health services, they're saying they don't meet the criteria, but this person is definitely unwell and getting unwell. Would that be a consideration? Would you be able to say, well, look, we're going to commission somebody to do this short piece of work, which is mental health, I don't know, registered mental health nursing type of work, to come in and prevent any crisis from happening with all care providers?
I can certainly take it back because obviously there's that sort of preventative side in it. I mean, our expectation is that if you're picking up someone with more challenging behaviours, the specification will refer to PBS. It's not necessarily an essential, but all different ways of sort of managing behaviours.
Yeah.
And then that should be flagged. And in an ideal world, if something is escalating, they should be able to have that. The care worker should be able to have the conversation with three-way conversation with family and social worker and try and put something preventative in place. This particular contract doesn't cover that because that'd be more a different intervention, but I totally appreciate that we need to have that sort of communication, the three-way, for something that it doesn't hit crisis before then someone gets to hospital. And the role of a home care worker is partly to have the eyes and ears for something like that, to pick up, not just going in and doing some care call. It's taking them out into the community, providing that support and knowing them, so that intervention can be put in place when it arises. And I appreciate sometimes those things don't happen, and it is a case of flagging. So it wouldn't be necessarily in this contract, but it's the expectation around the support workers to have that understanding of the process and how to bring people together when there is concerns. And it could be equally for someone with a physical health issue elsewhere as well.
Yeah. I think the challenge is the staff turnover, isn't it? It's a bit like what Rachel is saying, is staff turnover is so high, retention is so difficult, and companies are literally just doing recruitment, aren't they? Rather than focusing on the training. And the difficulty we have is that you can give somebody a training package online. That doesn't necessarily mean they've absorbed it all and have the ability to say, right, okay, this is early signs of psychosis when they've only done 2 shifts with them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I
think if they're working with mental health clients, we'd hope that they would be that additional level of support. And obviously, if you're working with someone with mental health, but it's on a very standardy sort of basis, that would be different. But if it's that specialism, it's understanding it. And we do expect our providers to be able to provide, the induction and the specific care and training needs as well. And that's something that our contracts teams would go out and be aware of. So those people, you'd be going out with someone who's probably more experienced in dementia and looking at that specific training. And I would also expect that there would be specifics around mental health and learning disability and different kinds of interactive communication that you just expect that provider to be able to deliver working at that as well. But again, it's all about feeding it back if there's any issues. And the care workers, the support workers, it's giving them the confidence and the knowledge to how to feed back and report on those things. It is difficult because there is, to be fair, a crisis at the moment in recruitment. I don't think anyone's in denial around that. That affects retention. It affects the continuity of the care. What we can try and impress in our contracts is to say, do what you can, try and keep the same group of people going in. If there's somebody new, at least let them know and communicate it. And as you're saying, Rachel, with your daughter, that if someone new's coming in, they know who it's going to be and they've seen a picture at the very least of them. So that's what we work to in an ideal world, and that's what we work to with our contracts teams as well.
That's like a 5-minute job, isn't it? If you've booked a shift with someone, you take a photograph of them and do a 1-page profile, and it's like a 5-minute job, isn't it? It's not like as if it's going to take forever. You kind of book a shift and take a photograph. So Tony, in terms of working with these providers, are the providers able to have some sort of forum where they come together and say, look, here's a challenge I've got, is I'm struggling to recruit, but people I've recruited, I need that very specific training or support, almost like a forum for providers to come together and say, do you know what, this is really challenging, and actually I can learn from you, or I can learn from you. But is there a way of bringing the providers together?
Now, I'm not sure, because I'm not new anymore, so I've been here 6 months. I might ask Fiona. Councils normally have forums, so if a learning disability forum, carers forum, I would imagine that they would be through the contracts team. I would expect there maybe to be a provider forum for dom care. I'm not personally involved in it, but that would be, I don't know if you know Fiona at all.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, there are provider forums, and there's a provider organisation. I've forgotten the name of it, but there is sort of provider representation groups that they have to be a member, and it provides that, or it should provide that support thing. How well it works in practice probably goes back to what we've already discussed. The theory might be there, but how well that works in practice, I don't know. So it's possibly something that we can look to develop.
Jason, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I use domiciliary care for helping me to get dressed in the morning. And you said that that care companies should tell you if there's a new person coming to see you, and what level of knowledge they know of what my condition is, or what they need to do. I'm afraid that does not work. It's seriously outdated and piece and that, because I was lucky today that I have my original carer that I have most days. He's off as of yesterday for 2 weeks, and the carer that came today I actually do know, but she hadn't been here for probably 3 years. So, and I don't always get a regular carer when my original carer is off every other weekend either. So it does seem to be whoever can do it, or whoever wants to do it, rather than, keeping, and they're not always local either.
And that's it. And I know, because I know you mentioned this, but when we spoke before about it, and it is a perennial issue. It's one we try and address and we tackle it. And at the monitoring stage in the contract, we can look at continuity. We can put it in the contract to say till the cows come home. It doesn't always happen. It's just something we'll keep stressing. It's not good, I just think it's common courtesy to let somebody know that a different carer is coming in, or someone has been rostered on, or they've changed. But I appreciate, in reality, it's nothing more annoying than someone just new turning up who doesn't know you and you've never met before, and they're coming to deliver personal care for you, which, you feel like a stranger coming into your house is not what you're looking for. So it does go in the contract, it does go in the spec, but I appreciate, in reality, it's something we just have to kind of keep pressing with. And some agencies might be better than others at it, with some care managers, or and not that I want you to have to be the one to complain, but do feedback as the client as well when that happens. And they should if you don't and you're polite, they'll just think, oh, it's not an issue. But when people raise it, you do have to
if people know me, and I'm not always polite when it comes to these issues. And I asked the carer came this morning who was coming tomorrow, or even over the weekend, and it wasn't even on her a mobile that she uses for work to so she's going to. So that, and we're now lunchtime on a Friday, and I still haven't got who's coming tomorrow, or even Sunday, which doesn't help me, because it doesn't. If they're going to come earlier than they normally would, then I need to know if they're getting up, because I can get out of bed, but it's just getting certain things done to get dressed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's something we just try and reinforce and keep on. And yeah, it doesn't help. It doesn't help when carers drop out, new people come in, or the rostering changes, shifts, with different runs and that. But yeah, definitely massively impacts on your day, doesn't it? And your mood when that happens.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a normal session, if you like, but I also have an ad-hoc in my care. And I had to use that yesterday, and I won't go into why, but they originally weren't going to come until last night. Just so happens that my original carer was still on and came to me 2 hours before, but I don't know whether he mentioned it to the office. But anyway, that's beside the point, because that's not to do with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to wonder now for the next 2 weeks what they're going to do if I need them out on that ad hoc scenario.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's difficult.
No.
Okay, so we've come to the end. We've gone over 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So yeah, the feedback thing, I've sent it again. If people can please complete the feedback. But yeah, thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Tony. That's been really helpful. I'm going to leave my details on there as well, because I think Patience has. If people want to contact me or have a look at sugar, what's going on here? Oh, there we go. So I'm going to leave mine. I'm trying to leave mine. It's not doing anything. Sorry, bear with me. Everyone in the meeting, that's the bit. There we go. Tony and Fiona, would you be happy to leave your email address in here, just in case people have got any other questions that they might want to ask? That's all right.
We put the generic one in, Fiona, in case we're not here, then someone else will pick up for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, put in our sort of, you know, the sort of the general one, and then obviously you can get if it's obviously then about supported living, I'll pick it up, and if it's about home care, Tony will pick it up. And we've also got a day services commissioner as well. And
autism commissioner at Cambridge.
Oh, and lastly, sorry, Fiona and Tony, once these contracts are given, will the information be easily accessible on the local offer page?
I don't know. I'm assuming so. I don't know. I'll have to check.
No worries, because I think at the moment they're trying to make that page a lot more updated and with all the information on it. So it'd be really helpful to have all of that on it, so people can have access to a directory of whoever you've contracted out to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Nothing.
What's that, Jason?
I was going to say nothing. I would doubt it because I haven't done it yet. So maybe that's something they need to put in their inbox for it to go on the local offer. Because I don't think the ones that they're using at the moment are on their local offer.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. I've had a look at the local offer, and it doesn't look as if that the provider list is on there. So I think I'm gonna let Louise know, but then obviously Tony and Fiona, I'm sure once they've contracted out to new people, we'll have a list of up-to-date list of the providers, so that that can then be added onto the website.
Is that for people who want to purchase their own care, like with direct payment?
Yeah, so the local offer is basically a one-stop shop for all SEND and disability and autism needs. And it's at the moment, I think like Rachel said earlier, we're quite focused on the younger age group. So there's things like schools and things, but actually there's nothing about the adult providers. So if people have direct payments and want to purchase a service, actually there's no real directory that's up to date that we can access. So it'd be really helpful. So once you guys have allocated your contracts and what have you, to have a directory of providers so that people can choose, because they should be able to choose anyway, shouldn't they? So people can then have a clear idea of what the providers are offering and their specialities or whatever. But it's like a one-stop shop, like the local offer on the website.
The local offer is for, sorry Nazreen, cutting in, the local offer is for 0 to 25, so it should be all SEN stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. So if you're a young person from 18 to 25 and you're looking for a care provider, you should be able to click on the local authority website, go on the local offer and have a list of providers who are able to offer, and then choose, and then just click all of them and ring them or whatever and be able to do that.
The person that will know that, and where it might be if it is on there at the moment, is Roger Valentine.
Yeah, can't hear you properly, Jason, but yeah. Right. I have to wrap it up. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, really
Bye-bye.
helpful. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.